Nebraska Hawks. These guys are brave. They're Hawkeyes, living in enemy territory. Listen, these guys are way past their prime, but they're still Hawkeyes. They're spreading the Hawkeye hype to all of Nebraska. The frost advisory is canceled. Corn Huskers, more like corn suckers. Are you ready for this podcast? Let's go Hawks!
All right, welcome to the Nebraska Hawks Nest, your nice little Hawkeye oasis in the middle of a little bit of a Nebraska desert out here, spreading the Hawkeye gospel amongst all the Huskers. So if you take a second, give us a like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, your neighbors, maybe hire a town crier and send them down to the town square, whatever it takes to get the Hawkeye gospel spread. We're here for you. So as you can see, we're going a little bit solo today. Adam's feeling a little under the weather. So wasn't able to make the interview. Now, Maddie, anybody that's watched our podcast, Maddie, the Miller Lite Delight Ice, came for a visit last night. So whether these are natural factors or unnatural factors, why Adam doesn't feel so well today, we're not sure. But you've got me here, and we've got the pleasure of a guest that I am completely thrilled to interview today, Sir Jamalot, Gerry Wright. Gerry, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. Beautiful day out here in Southern California.
Oh, that's awesome. It's not quite as warm here in Nebraska, so we're a little bit jealous of you there, but we won't talk about it too much. We got a lot to talk about here. As it goes with guests we've had, I'm not sure. We've got a guy here with a pretty colorful and complete history of a lot of different things. So to start off with, Gerry, tell us what you're up to now out there in California.
I am in my 21st year in the San Bernardino School District. I am a supervisor in the district. As well as in my, this is 18th year of coaching.
Wow.
As a head coach, anyway.
Right. And that's a head coach at the community college level, or is that a school
That's
level?
Correct.
Okay,
community college level.
So I read a stat on you that says that you, at one point, when you were at your 15 years, you had a 100% graduation rate and a 95% matriculation rate, moving players to four-year universities. Is that stat still intact?
That stat is nearly still intact. I've had one player in that 3-year span that didn't graduate, and also one player that didn't move to the next level.
Well,
so
that's an incredible rate. That is an incredible rate, and that's an incredible influence on a lot of young people that you've had. So it's a lot of kudos to you for that. As we get into talk about this, I'm excited. There may be a lot of rabbit holes for somebody like me that has that has a tendency to remember a lot of things from watching the Hawks growing up. You bridged some pretty important careers in what I would term a golden age of basketball, at least for me, in the early and mid 1980s. So starting off with coming out of San Bernardino as a kid and your recruitment, Gerry, you didn't go to Iowa first. Tell us about, how growing up, what spurred your interest in basketball? What kind of a kid, what kind of interest did you have? How did you end up then, going to USC to start, and kind of take us into that, up to that, freshman year?
I was a football player.
Really?
To start with. And thought I was going to be a great football player, but I was one of those kids, probably typical of most kids. I had the heart, didn't have the body. So I love football. It didn't love me back, and I ended up breaking my neck when I was 14.
No kidding.
That's how I came to basketball. When I recovered from that, they told me I could never play football again. And so at that point, I took up basketball in my ninth grade year. And so it didn't go so good at first. I didn't know any of the rules. I didn't understand the sport really. It took me a while to, even get the coordination for it. But I had a good coach, and he had the foresight to put me in a gymnastics class.
No
So
kidding.
my first couple of years of high school, I was learning to play basketball and taking gymnastics for my coordination, and it all came together by my junior year. And junior year, I took off runner-up player of the year in California. The next year, I was player of the year in California. And I made the mistake of I didn't understand basketball recruitment whatsoever. I was a football guy. So, of course, my dream, being a football guy from California, was going to USC. So that's how I ended up at USC, and it dawned on me halfway through that, it probably wasn't a great idea for a basketball guy to go to a football school. There was no one at the games. The team wasn't very good, and I did well. I was runner-up freshman of the year in the conference. And so after that, I knew I needed to get to a basketball school.
Sure. Very nice. Now, were you like me? I kind of had the similar experience with football when I was young. Did you grow faster than everybody else? So that kind of left you wide open. I think I led my little league in the amount of times I got the wind knocked out of me because I was so much taller than everybody else. Is that similar to you as well?
That was me, and guys shooting at my knees and ankles.
Well, and that's how I ended up playing basketball as well. So we've got a little bit in common on that one. But when you mentioned USC is not a basketball school though, but the USC your freshman year had a pretty darn good women's team, if the years tell me correctly, and they had a couple of players named Cynthia Cooper and Cheryl Miller, I believe. Did you ever have any interaction with them while you were there? Or?
Yeah, I knew Cheryl from high school. She was from 15 minutes away, she and Reggie. So I knew Reggie and Cheryl even before we went to USC. But the girls were great. Also on that team were Paula and Pam McGee.
Yes.
Pam is the mother of JaVale McGee in the NBA.
No kidding.
Yeah, she was better than her son. she was really good.
Well, names like that on that team, I think they were probably better than some of the men's team down throughout history. They probably, they could have gave anybody a contest.
They won the national championship, I want to say about 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, I believe the year you were there, they won the national title. Exactly.
Right.
So your familiarity with the Millers, then were you ever privy? They used to go down and they'd go win lunch money on the playground courts, taking on other teams. Were you ever privy to any of that when they were growing up?
No. I was too much of a nerd for that. I'd be too nervous. I'd give it away.
You'd just be laughing while they let everybody on that they weren't that good. Well, that's awesome. I didn't realize you had that personal connection. So were you ever around Reggie then? Did he talk as much when he was younger as he did when he got to the pros?
Reggie's always been a talker.
Has he?
He's always been a talker.
Oh, that's
never
awesome.
Short of confidence.
That's awesome. So kind of tailing on the end of your USC that first season then, you guys made a trip to the field house in Iowa City, the old field house before Carver Hawkeye. And you got involved in a little bit of a scrap there a little bit. And
only game I've ever been kicked out of. The last game played in the old field house.
Yeah. Well, I got something here. It's just a short little clip we'll play for the people at home that are watching this. Again, it's nothing embarrassing, but just kind of lend a little color as far as what had what transpired here. So 1 second.
Well, this ought to be good. I've never seen this.
Well, we've got a crack research team here. So anyway, so here we go.
Bebe, mire eso. Soy yo allí. Hello!
Well, that was the slow motion replay after it happened. But anyway, so yeah, you got in that and technical. And then also there was an Iowa player ejected, if I recall. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, it's funny because Steve and I are cool.
Yeah.
So he just I don't know if it was Steve that got me. Someone got me earlier, and I'm a football guy. I'm gonna get you back. And I don't remember who it was, but he took the blow. And of all the people to hit, that was the wrong guy. He was like a demigod, at the time. But that's my guy. He's a Southern California guy.
Yep, I was going to say Bellflower, if I recall.
Yeah,
was it Bellflower?
Bellflower, about an hour away. And his brother went to USC, so I had met his brother Don. And when I eventually went to Iowa, Steve was the one. He was happiest.
He was the one with welcoming arms, even though we got the shot in the game. Huh?
He took the shot. I think he liked the toughness, though. He respected the toughness. He's like, we need some of that.
I remember him playing was when he'd shoot a 3-pointer, it would disappear. It had such a high arc, it would disappear out of the screen view watching at home, and then it would drop down into the hoop from nowhere. And I mean, you just kind of wondered where the heck it went. You kind of had this idea of loop maybe through the rafters when he shot it. He just put so much arc on those shots. So, oh, that's great. He went on to have a pretty good career in Australia, if I recall correctly, didn't he?
Yeah. A good playing career, and then ended up being a color analyst down there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I reached out to him for a couple of kids. I've recruited some kids from Australia.
Yeah.
And so we've had contact afterwards like that.
Well, sure. We've tried to reach out to him a couple times on email, but we're hoping to be successful. Maybe get him on here again and catch up with him. He's another favorite from back in the day. We interviewed Bob Hogue early, the old Iowa play-by-play analyst from back in your time, and he was talking about the kind of the having the first basketball network as per se, and kind of how you guys were treated like rock stars at different times because you had the following of the entire state when he was broadcasting, and Carfina was one he mentioned. So, oh, that's awesome. But anyway, so go ahead then. We go from there, and why choose Iowa, Gerry? As you said, you wanted to go to a basketball school, but what brought you to Iowa?
Mainly the Twin Towers, Stokes and Payne.
Uh-huh.
And I knew that, those two players on the team meant that I would not attract nearly as much attention as I'm trying to get my footing as a sophomore. And also George Raveling had recruited me out of high school. He recruited myself, and two of my teammates actually went to Washington State and told me, he's a good guy, he's a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I ended up coming
Sure.
over. He recruited me again.
Sure. And had you had much interaction from him back when you played USC in the Pac-10 then, or was? And
yeah, I mean, he was at my house quite a lot recruiting me out of high school. I mean, he was in San Bernardino all the time. He was recruiting the three of us.
Yeah.
We had 4 or 5 Division I players on my high school team.
No kidding.
It was a pretty good team.
It sounds like it. How'd you guys do? And were you state titleists, or did you do well in the state competitions?
We lost. We lost a game before. We lost in the semifinals. It was the only game we lost all year.
Yeah.
And then the year before, we lost 2 games, and at the same point. So I only lost those 3 games in high school. We were pretty good.
I apologize. I've got a cat that probably thinks I need a co-host here and was wanting to get in the screen. So anyway, that sounds pretty good. So Stokes and Payne, that would be Michael Payne and Greg Stokes. And we're going to get into that a little bit here too, because again, when we talked about it, you got to play with some pretty good players in Iowa history there. Yeah. So, you come in and you get to play along a Greg Stokes. And I mean, he ends up now that he is, he's a second or third leading scorer in school history now. But at the time when you were there, he would have been the first. And what was he like behind the scenes? What, work ethic, practices? I mean, what kind of guy was he, and what was it that led to his success?
Greg was a tough guy. He was the enforcer. No question about it. I remember once I took care of Greg. I always set him up with passes, feeding him the ball. And I remember we were playing Illinois, and they had a big guy named George Montgomery, I think his name was, and he hit me with an elbow that just, like split my chest open, right?
Uh-huh. And
I'm laying on the floor trying to catch my breath, and all Greg said was, "Who got you, G? Who got you?" And I pointed at the biggest guy on the floor, like that guy right there. So okay, about three or four trips down the floor, and before I knew it, he had clocked him with an elbow, and Big George was doubled over. So that's the kind of guy Greg was.
He always had your back,
was our
huh?
enforcer. Yeah, he had everybody's back,
Yeah.
and he could play.
Oh, that was no doubt. I remember he had that hook shot in the lane that he could go up with.
Hook. Yes.
Yep. He was a master of that. And then Michael Payne out of Quincy, Illinois, 6'11", maybe probably maybe more finesse. But I mean, what do you remember about Michael Payne then as well?
Oh, just smooth. Yeah, he was ahead of his time. He was a player that would have thrived in the game today the way it's played.
Sure.
Where back then a guy that big playing a finesse style of game, they want to put a skirt on him,
Mm-hmm.
But in today's game, with no contact, no touching, you can't hit guys like before. He'd have eaten this game up.
Yeah, no, and he did. He was, and that was kind of so nimble and quick. And I mean, it was the kind of athletic ability you really didn't see come around until maybe like a David Robinson or somebody came on the scene as far as his ability went.
Even like I can positively compare him to Durant. Not nearly to that level, but in that direction for sure. Because he can handle the ball, he can shoot the jump shot, he can pass. Sit down and defend, and then he'd stretch out. He's 6'11".
Sure. Do you guys still keep up with those guys then, or
occasionally? Occasionally, unfortunately, mostly on sad occasions now. If someone's ill or we lost Michael Reeves a few years ago.
Oh, really?
About a year and a half ago, I guess it is. And so that sort of brought us all together again.
Under unfortunate circumstances.
Right.
Yeah.
Same with Roy when Roy passed away.
Yeah.
Brought us together again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, unfortunately it's part of life, but you hate for those to be the circumstances that you get back together with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, going through then what was your, your first, maybe even like your first winter in Iowa City, but what was that first year in Iowa City like for a California guy like yourself? What were the first impressions? What were the places, the hangouts that you learned to go to? And what was your first winter like?
I remember that first winter. Once it got to about October, every day for about 6 weeks was the new coldest day of my life. And I knew right away. I wrote home. I said, "Hey, you got to send me some kind of winter jacket here. This little thin flight. I had my dad's flight jacket. That was the warmest thing I had.
Uh-huh.
And the breeze walking across that Iowa River was just tearing that thing up. So that first winter was tough, but we played indoors, and I knew that's what I was there for. And
sure,
you tough it up and get through it.
So there was no regrets then when this first snowfall you ran into. There was no regrets saying, "What did I get myself into?"
No.
Had you ever seen snow before that, Gerry?
I did once I went on a Christian retreat, and they took us up in the mountains. They let us run outside and lose our minds when the snow started falling. I think I must have been about 12 or 14 or 13 or so.
Yeah. It's one of those things you never thought you'd be living in, though, was it?
No. It didn't go to Notre Dame because of that.
Really? You had the chance to go to Notre Dame, huh?
That was my school. The two schools I had narrowed it down to coming out of high school, USC and Notre Dame. And without a mistake, I could have been playing for Digger Phelps, and but it was a football school, and Notre Dame and USC, the big rivalry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was huge back in the day, with Joe Montana back at Notre Dame, and USC, and Marcus Allen, and I think it was maybe Charles White before that. Yeah, I mean that was a great football rivalry back in the day. So you move on then in your second year again, Coach Raveling. Coach Raveling, I used to love he kind of shook up the following with his Nike sweatsuits on the sideline. Everything up to that point had been the tough shirt and tie and coat type demeanor. And
Right.
Coach Raveling came in with the Nike sweatsuits, and I don't know the fans knew what to think of it, but what kind of personality was he behind the scenes?
He was a character. He was a very, bigger than life character. You definitely knew when he entered the room, either for the Nike suit or for his big boisterous personality.
Yeah. And he used to have those great. It was always fun watching the games with him in Indiana because it was just, I don't know, he and Knight just kind of had that. You could just tell it was just a great coaching battle between the two of them when they played each other. But so anyway, your sophomore year then, or excuse me, your second year at Iowa then, I believe, was his final season, and he ends up transferring. Were you privy to any of that, or did you suspicion anything behind the scenes before he left?
No, it actually happened. So I redshirted, and he was there, and then I played for him as a sophomore and as a junior, and then he left.
Okay.
I was not. I know that there was pressure on him because of with the squad that he had assembled, we should have been winning more.
Mm-hmm.
Even my sophomore year with Greg, I was all Big Ten as a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
With Greg and Michael, and we had good guards. I mean, Todd Birkenpass.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember Todd. He
Yeah.
was an outstanding player. If he had played for Tom Davis, I think he would have had a shot to continue to play.
Mm-hmm.
He was that good. Tom was that good.
One of the all-time leading scorers out of Mapleton, Iowa.
Yeah, he was something else. And then not only Todd, also there was BJ Armstrong, my freshman year. Also Michael Reeves. I mean, we had guards enough with that front line, we should have been winning more. And we got bounced after, in the first round. And then the second year, the same thing. We got bounced in the first round. And the one thing that having that amount of talent will do is it will expose your coaching chops.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you start facing those teams that have an equal amount of talent.
Mm-hmm.
And like talent, the talent can carry you and make you, it can make a coach who may not be as adept as a coach look great until he comes up against someone who can put together, a plan, a strategy, and so forth and so on. And so I think that pressure was mounting, that people were saying, hey, you can recruit, can you coach?
Mm-hmm.
And and that's always been the knock on Raveling.
Yeah.
Great recruiter, great guy, great at putting together these teams, but can you put together the X's and the O's?
Mm-hmm.
And Tom came in, and Tom had just the opposite reputation. Great coach, great with strategy, can't recruit. And when those two forces came together, then that's, of course, that great run is my senior year.
Sure. What were your first impressions of Dr. Tom when he came in the doors over there, Gerry? I mean, what kind of describe what happened and what were your first thoughts?
I didn't really know what to think, but I remembered him because when I was a freshman at USC, it was his first year at Stanford, and he went in there and turned that program around and gave USC the worst loss they had ever had up until that point in the Pac-10.
Really?
In the history of the school. So, I mean, thumped us by like 25 or something. I mean, it was ugly. and they were pressing, and he had a kid that was a walk-on that was starting in his starting lineup, who was a freshman walk-on starting for him. And I was like, I like that. I thought that was pretty ballsy.
Sure.
And so I knew of him, but I didn't know him. But we hit it off from day one. He pulled me in his office when he got the job. He met with everybody that was returning. He's going down. He's like, "Oh, okay, you set the school record for single season field goal percentage." He says, you can do that again. That'll be fine. He says, "Shot it good. Yeah, you can do that. That'll be fine." Okay. And that was it.
Yeah.
and I said to him, I said, the office looks really different, without George. George had the office lined with just walls and walls of books from top to bottom. And, Tom, there was nothing on the wall, little stereo system for his music. And he had a basketball chalkboard that he had put up and like a whiteboard. And that was it. And I was like, wow, it looks really different. He said, I don't make any pretenses. I'm a basketball coach. That's all I do. So I said, I like that. I like that.
Well, that pretty much told about his style as well. So no, that's great. That is great. And so when you talk about the pressing and everything, and he comes in, you guys came in, and then you talk about the talent that was on that team when he came in as well. And you guys handed Indiana, and they were eventual national champion that year, but you handed Indiana it was the first time a night team had given up more than 100. It was like 101 to 68, I believe, or 88. And I mean, how was it that did it just click during the transition from George to Tom, or was there anything behind the scenes? But it just seemed like it clicked.
It clicked because Tom could coach. I mean, he was a great coach. I mean, he's one of the best coaches I've played for in my career, and I played for some good ones. But he just knew what he was doing. He had a clear vision of how it should look, and he was, Tom himself. He was a baller when he was a young guy. I think he was at Wisconsin Green Bay. I want to say one of those schools, but he could play. He jumped in practice a couple times, like he snatched the ball from BJ. Beach, do it like this, and we were shocked, like, oh, this guy can play. He dribbles the ball, throws it around the back pass, hits the guy right on the money. Okay, I got it. I remember that. I got everybody's attention. We didn't know. We didn't know he could play. George couldn't play. George could rebound, but he couldn't play.
Sure. We, when I think about that, and you mentioned that Indiana game, I remember Dr. Tom having that full court press that you guys played against everybody. But I'll never forget Bobby Knight, and I don't know if it was ever made true or not, but I can remember Kent Hill especially guarding that inbounds pass on that full court. And it was like, always when you played Indiana, there always seemed to be a time where the ball would get thrown right off the defender's face or head.
Right.
And it was always suspicion maybe that Knight was doing it on purpose.
He told Steve Alford to hit Brad. Brad was my year. It was Brad Lohaus. He's all over that inbounder, and he winds up and drills him in the chest. But found out later, Bobby had told him to hit him in the face.
Really?
Like that'd back him up,
Yeah.
Alfred hits him in the chest, and Brad shakes it off, and there we are. I remember that game. That was the first game against Bobby Knight when he was coaching against Tom that I saw Bobby out coached.
Sure.
I've never seen Coach Knight out coached like that. It was a very close game, right up until I want to say about 2 or 3 minutes left. It was a 3-point game, 2-point game, something like that. But we ended up winning by about 12. And there was a timeout where we scored. Bobby calls a timeout. In the huddle, Coach Davis says, hey, keep fast breaking. If made or miss, fast break, get a bucket in transition. And don't call a timeout. Don't burn any of my timeouts. Just keep playing. He said, I trust what we're doing on offense, that we will be more organized than whatever they're going to put together on defense, made or miss. So if we miss, don't hold it and walk it up the floor and play against their half-court D. Run our transition. And so every time they would score, or we would score, they would call a timeout, let our defense get set. Every time they would shoot, made or miss, we'd fast break the other way, and we scored on every one of those possessions. And that's what made it look like we beat them worse than we did. So it was great. I was like, that stuck with me, and I used that in my own coaching career.
Yeah. What were your impressions then playing against Bobby Knight? Did you ever have any interactions with him, or was it all from a distance? Or
no, actually, my first impression was as a sophomore. Ball goes out. I'm the inbounder, and he picks it up, and so I stand beside him, and he's just waiting for the ref to come over. And the ref comes over and he gives him an earful like I've never heard in my life. I mean, it would have made a sailor blush. And the ref is just calm as can be. Come on, Bob. Come on, give me the ball, Bob. And he's holding it like he's like a little kid, like, no, and I didn't come to Iowa City to get effed over by you and blah, 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 blah. And I start trembling because I'd never, seen someone so angry. And so that was my first impression. And then after the last game that I played against him, we're leaving the floor. We just beat him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tough loss, the last home game. And he comes over, he as we're walking toward the tunnel, he jogs up and he puts his arm on my shoulder in the tunnel and says, "Hey, I've really enjoyed competing against you these years." And he said, you are the one kid on this team. You definitely could have played for me. It would have been an honor to have you play for me.
Sure.
And I thought that was, and I think he knew I was, a military kid. And I think that resonated with him as well.
Sure. From his time coaching at West Point, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Right. That's right.
Then when he had a young Mike Krzyzewski, I believe, playing or coaching with him, something like that.
Playing and coaching.
Yeah. All right. So, when we talk about, Gerry Wright and his athletic ability, we got another one here. I'm going to share another video clip here, if you don't mind, just to give give the fans an idea of what we enjoyed as Iowa fans back then.
It's funny seeing the court with no 3-point line.
All right. Well, I got to apologize. The sound quality maybe wasn't the greatest on some of those, and but anyway, you were back before Dominique back in the '80s. You were Iowa's version of the human highlight film with a lot of the the dunks and the aerials you performed. I mean, did you always have that natural ability for hang time?
I couldn't shoot, so everything had to be point blank range. And, that let me get into the basket quite a lot.
Sure. And again, we touched on it at the beginning, but when did you come up with the moniker of Sir Jamalot? How did that start?
That was a high school teammate.
Really?
High school teammate pinned that one on me. It was really for DJing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were horrible at it, but like most kids, most seniors, we love music, and thought we were good at it.
Hey, I'm sure you sounded good to you guys, but yeah, to everybody else in the room, maybe not so much.
Not so much.
So take us into that 86-87 season then, Gerry. And again, we'll talk a little bit more, but you mentioned, the talent, the BJ Armstrong, Roy Marble, Ed Horton, Brad Lohaus, Les Jepson. I mean, all these future NBA players on that roster. And I mean, did you guys realize what was going to happen that season? Did you have any kind of an idea?
I don't think we did. I really don't believe that we did. Because we had that, the talent was already there. A lot of it was just buried on the bench. Lohaus was already there. Kevin Gamble was there. Ed Horton was there. my junior year, and again we get bounced in the first round, and so we did not know we were as good as we had the potential to be, because we hadn't lived up to that potential up until that point. So we just thought we were just another one of those teams. We were good, but we in the top 20 certainly, but that's par for the course in the Big Ten during that time.
Sure.
I think I want to say my junior year, seven out of the 10 teams make it to the NCAA playoffs, to the dance. So we were just another of those teams in the mix. We hadn't done anything up until that point.
Sure.
So we had the potential, but it was, and we knew we would be good, but it wasn't until we went on that historic roll, which unfortunately I was watching from the sideline.
Well,
I had broken my with the broken hand. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten about that, because you went out and played with the cast on your hand a few games, didn't you?
Yeah, that was before they were really willing to give those medical red shirts. If in today's game, I probably would have been redshirted for missing half the season. But at that point, I had already redshirted when I came from USC, and so now they would have granted me a medical red shirt, and I would have been able to sit out that year and play. But at that time, they didn't. That was kind of unheard of.
So what are your memories, the biggest memories of that season, Gerry? Like, was there any specific games, or was there anything specific then? I mean, like you said, you had you guys went on a big roll. You won over 30 games. It was a season full of highs. What stands out the most to you?
The Illinois win. That's when we knew we were good. That's we were down 22 in the second half. I want to say we were down 22 with about 15 minutes left in the game. And we came on the road at Illinois, and we were ranked number 2 in the nation at that time. We had just beaten Purdue. To Purdue win, everyone thought was huge. We went on the road, we beat, Gene Cady and Purdue, and they were a ranked team, but we were ranked in the top 5 at that point, maybe 3 or 4, somewhere in there. And then the next game, I want to say North Carolina's ranked number 1, and we're ranked number 2. And we're playing Illinois at Illinois. And when we came back from that deficit and beat them, and it was a turning point for me as well. I had been struggling with the broken hand, and it was in Tom had said, look, if when you can hit your free throws again, that's when we're going to put you back in there and increase your minutes. So my minutes have been increasing all along the way. But in that Illinois game, I think in the second half, he saw that, okay, when the game's on the line, I still got it. And I think I had 14 in that game or so, and maybe 7 or 8 rebounds or so. But he saw my confidence come back. And he knew, okay, G's back. And so after that game, he had put me back in the starting lineup. So it was great for us as a team. That road trip was where we really came together, and it was great for me personally to win back the trust of the squad.
Well, that's great. That's great information, because as Hawkeye fans, we always kind of wonder what was going on. What goes on behind the scenes. We didn't have an internet back then, and different things, so we were relying on a lot of the media, so they weren't as privy maybe to going on behind the scenes to hear things like that. So I got another video here I want to share. This is the last one here, and hopefully the quality's a little better here. But you guys have a successful season. You go on and you play a Sweet 16 game with Arkansas, and again, my cat wants to keep helping. I apologize to everybody out there. So, but anyway, let me.
Oklahoma.
I'm sorry, Oklahoma, not Arkansas. Yeah. Excuse me. My apologies. I had the wrong team here.
One of my high school teammates. So he was the starting guard, 6'7" 2 guard for Oklahoma, Dave Seeger, and he's the one that the following year, when Oklahoma goes to the finals, sets the record for knocking down 7 threes in the finals. So you can just imagine how my high school team was.
One of the most exciting moments, I think, in Hawkeye basketball history happened, and we're going to play a little clip from it here.
boom.
So I believe when we see that there, I think on the bench, we see a young Gerry Wright on the bench over there celebrating the moment. But take us behind that moment, Gerry, on the bench, the timeout that preceded it, I mean, what was the feeling and mood like before that? Because again, it's one of the pinnacle moments in Iowa basketball history.
Well, it was huge. It was, I had played really good that game and fouled out leading up to that moment. And I just felt like, oh man, I just let my team down, but there were three seniors. It was myself, Kevin, and Brad, and and we had we just were running a flex 5, I want to say it was. And when I looked at the clip right now, that's what it looked like. I was trying to remember the play, but and on that play, BJ slides over a little further to the wing, and Kevin slides over into the slot, and they were sinking it in because we were getting it inside. We were hurting them inside. And they just sunk down there and like they forgot about Kevin. And he didn't, he's a baller. He didn't hesitate.
I was going to say, that was the abundance of riches on that team, because how do you forget about Kevin Gamble? I mean, he goes on to have an illustrious NBA career, and a great shooter.
And Kevin, I remember that was a huge moment for Kevin, huge. And he said to me afterwards, he said, I've been dreaming of that moment all my life to hit the game-winning bucket in a really big and important game. He was just, and he's pretty, he's a pretty reserved guy. He doesn't, he's not gushing with emotion.
Sure.
But I remember in that moment he was, that was like, and he was waiting for. I mean, he had played, lights out all season, and I don't think he was. We just had so much talent that he was kind of like you said, how do you forget about that guy? But there was so much talent on that squad. You can't forget about Brad. He's 7'1". Roy Marble's getting all the tremendous press, and deservedly so. BJ's coming into his own and starting to be recognized. But he was kind of the odd guy out, and he hadn't. And he was buried on the bench during the Raveling years. And the guy sitting next to him, buried on the bench, was Brad. And so he hadn't had that moment. And that's what he was really expressing in that moment, while he was gushing with emotion. And that was great. I was really happy for him.
Oh, and it was such an incredible moment as a fan. It was just such a high and elation, because to have a team win like that, to earn a trip to the Elite Eight on that moment, it was incredible. So, and then finally after that, then the game with UNLV, and we won't get too much into that because we don't want to explore anything too much there. A little bit of a down moment, but I mean it was a great team, and I mean it was within an eyelash of getting to that Final Four. I mean, what was the feeling like during that game? And
oh man, we were in control of that game. Leading into the game, they were like, well, will the Hawkeyes try to run with UNLV? And we were laughing. Will UNLV try to run with us?
Right.
Is what we were thinking. And we were number ranked. We were seated 1 and 2, and so we knew it was going to be a good game. I think what surprised us was it was as much of a game of runs as it was. We've never had anybody make a run like that on us. So we start off with a great run. I want to say we went up by 15 or 20 points early on, and then they make a run, and they come back, and it's neck and neck, and then they make another run, and they go ahead, and then we make a run, and we come back, and it had an NBA flow to it, and that was unfamiliar to probably as much to them as it was to us. In fact, I know it was. I knew a lot of the guys on the team, and I ended up playing professionally with a couple of them. And we would talk about that. There was a lot of talent on the floor in that game, but just the ebb and flow of the game was unfamiliar. Like I said, we've never had anybody make a run like that on us, against our press, against our our speed and quickness. they started hitting shots, and it was a great game. And I think it ended up being a 1-point game at the end, one or two. But and somebody's got to be on the downside of that, unfortunately. And I always look at it like, that, had we won that game, we were beating Indiana. That was a given. We had spanked them twice. I wasn't worried about Tom, being outcoached by Bobby Knight. Like, not when I've seen him outcoach Bobby Knight twice. And we just weren't having it. If you look at the talent on that Indiana team, not to dismiss any of that talent, but they were not as deep as we were.
Mm-hmm.
None of them went on and had those types of careers, not even Alfred. We could match that, and coaching-wise, I felt we had the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bobby Knight is historically the more celebrated coach, but anybody who was there in the moment would know, Dr. Davis was a better coach when it came to the X's and O's.
Oh, definitely. We'll just take Dr. Davis. Dr. Tom is the better coach, just in any realm. He was a great class guy and he's a great coach and a great guy. Yeah,
he could put the game, and I give him a lot of credit. I mean, he comes into a situation where he has all this talent, and we were good. He could have just left it alone, but he came in and he's like, no, these guys, these positions, he's right. You've been playing small forward. I'm moving you to center. Lowhouse, you've been sitting on the bench trying to be a center. I'm moving you to stretch forward, which is a position I had never heard of, and he told me he made me a rim runner. I had never heard of that. He said, you just run from this rim to that rim as fast as you can. I guarantee you're going to beat everybody down the floor. We'll throw the ball to you, you dunk it. Then he said, same with Kevin Gamble, who was playing power forward. I'm moving you to the 2 guard. And I'm going to put Roy at the small forward.
Mm-hmm.
And we, okay. And it's like one of those, a great conductor comes in and he's listening to the orchestra and it's like, you play this note, you play that note, you play that one, you play that one. You guys ready? Okay. Bam, and it's the damnedest chord you ever heard in your life, right? And that's exactly what happened with Tom.
Oh, that is awesome. So were you there, or at what point did they realize Brad Lowhouse could shoot 3-pointers? Because I think Georgia
he could always shoot.
He didn't do it much in games, did he? Before Dr. Tom got there?
Well, no, George wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
George was very old school, and Tom was evolving with the game. He very much coached a pro style of game. And he said, you put players where they belong on the floor according to their DNA, not according to, well, he's my tallest guy, so I'm going to make him a center. And that was George's thinking. And so George was always trying to fit, this round peg in a square hole. And it didn't, obviously didn't take. And so, like, you're soft, you need to be in there, you need to be under the basket, you need to be tough, get in the weight room, he's the type of coach that would have taken Magic Johnson and posted him up, as opposed to let that guy play where he plays, And Tom came in and said, well, he told me, he said, my job, because I asked him about all those changes. I was like, really? He said, gee, my job as a coach, my only job as a coach, is to put you on a position on the floor where you can have success. If you can have success shooting the ball, that's where we're going to put you. If you can have success posting up, then I'm going to create those situations where you're going to, be one-on-one in the post. So, as he evaluated all of us, and he was spot on with his evaluations, he's like, I'm going to put you guys where you need to be so that you can complement each other and bring out your strengths. And we'll work on those weaknesses. Like I asked him, I said, do you think I need to shoot more from the outside? Because I could shoot by then,
By then,
I could shoot a little bit. And I said, do you think I need to do more of that to help myself in terms of the draft? And he said, no. He said, what you do well enough that they'll pay to either find out or to teach you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so just, play to your strengths. And that's what he did with all those guys. I mean, guys got an opportunity that, one of the things that a lot of people didn't know, BJ was getting ready to transfer at Georgia
Really?
State. BJ was transferring. He was out of there. He was like, this guy is not letting me play, because Coach Raveling, he didn't like all that fancy dribbling and, no look pass and around the back. And this, Tom came in and says, hey, man, do that. That's who you are. Be who you are. And just
Nope.
within the framework of what we do, and take care of the ball. And, well, the rest is history.
So no kidding. Did BJ have a target school in mind then, or was he just had enough?
I don't know that it was that far along, but
Uh-huh.
he was to that point where he had enough.
Wow. I had never heard that before. So that's I guess that's my my big learning moment of this interview.
That's my little insider information. There you go.
I appreciate that, Gary. I that's great information. I was never aware of that. So let's go ahead and go into the post basketball career then, Gary. You finish up at Iowa, and I remember they always talked about it when you were in college. You had a dream of flying one day. I remember that talking about the interviews back when you played at Iowa. What ended up happening then after you got out of Iowa, and where did you end up?
So my dad was a flyer in the Air Force, and so he didn't much like it that I did my officer training with the Marine Corps. I was like, you Air Force guys are pansies, man. So I'm going to Quantico. So I did my officer training with the Marine Corps. I was commissioned in the Navy.
Uh-huh.
Initially, like there's always not always, when there is a backlog for flight school, they send you other places or whatever. And I end up initially at the Naval Academy. So my first year and a half, I was a instructor at the Naval Academy and assistant basketball coach. Unfortunately, that was life in the AD after David. But David was still there at the academy, so we became friends and we worked out, together. And we graduated the same year, so we were literally there for a while together until he went off with the Seabees, and he had to do his engineering thing. And a year and a half later, I'm transferred down to Pensacola, and I go through, ground school, flight school, that whole shot. So they let David out about a year in, or no, I think he did like half of his commitment. My commitment was 7 years, and I ended up doing 3. And I had never intended to get out of my commitment. That was kind of a difference between us. Of course, he had, San Antonio waiting on him.
Sure.
There was nobody really waiting on me.
and for the crowd at home, that may not be aware, we're talking about David Robinson, future NBA Hall of Famer. Oh, yeah. But go ahead and continue. Go ahead. No, that's fine. Go ahead and continue, Gary.
Yeah. So after flight school, or during flight school, I'm doing great through flight school. It's funny because I think most of the guys that were in flight school, it's not at all like they, portrayed in the movies. It's a lot of nerds, guys that have graduated from, different schools and engineering and whatnot. And so they're partying for the first time. And, I'm coming from Iowa, basketball, I've already been through all of that. So I'm locked into the books, and I finished, number 2 in my flight school class. And they give me the possibility to fly jets, which is the pipeline that I wanted. But they were no longer using an aircraft in the training command that I fit. They did when I entered the program, but because of budget cuts, they went back to the A4. They were using the old Vietnam leftover A4s, and that was, I couldn't get in there with a shoehorn, but they put me in, and they looked at it. The flight surgeon was shaking his head. I was like, no. He said, He said, if you eject, you're going to lose both your legs. And so that was the end of that. And so at that point, I could no longer pursue the pipeline that I wanted. I wanted to eventually go through the jet pipeline and then apply for the astronaut pilot program. That was my ultimate, goal. And once I couldn't pursue that anymore, they said you can have anything else. And I never made a decision. And I was like, well, it ain't much of a choice in the Navy here. I could fly the P-3 Orion, which is a huge. It'd be like driving a bus after flying in the the smaller planes and or helicopters. And I thought, okay, the helo bud, but I never made a decision, and so they made it for me. They assigned me helicopters, and at that point, I transitioned out. They let me out because the Atlanta Hawks had picked up. They invited me to their camp.
Okay.
They were looking for a backup to Dominique Wilkins, and so they were like, well, there's not a lot of guys that are, we're getting phone calls like that. So they were cool. You've given us half of your commitment, and so we're good with that. And so it was it's very nice.
So you and Dominique, in the same building, because you, from what I read, if this is correct, when you were in Pensacola, you were allowed to play CBA there while you were there, and you were the slam dunk champion of the CBA that season, weren't you?
Yeah, I guess I buried the headline. Yeah, while I was in flight school, there was a team in Pensacola, the CBA, the Pensacola Tornadoes. I guess it's like the G League now, or it'd be along those lines. But they went all the way to the Secretary of the Navy to get permission for me to play for them. And so they said, as long as it doesn't interfere with your flight training schedule, or and it's funny. I read the wording of it. I was looking at it maybe over Christmas, so we were moving some stuff around. And I came across the actual letter, and it said, as long as your basketball doesn't interfere with your flight training schedule. And for my CO, what that meant for him, we're going to arrange your flight schedule so that it doesn't interfere with your basketball, because he was a huge basketball guy. So I thought that was funny. So what they did was I flew all my missions at like 5 or 6 in the morning so that I could be fresh for afternoon practice. And then whenever we had a game that night, I didn't have a morning flight. It was essentially like having the day off. I had, ground duty or, paperwork or something. So they were real sweet about it.
So did you win it on the old cartwheel dunk that we always heard about when you played?
Yeah. Threw down the cartwheel dunk. I want to say that I let off with that, and like let's get to it right away.
Sure.
Deal with this.
Now, if I remember correctly, you could actually do the cartwheel because you could hold the ball. Your hands were big enough. You could actually do the cartwheel with the ball on one hand, right, and then come up.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's correct.
That's I was actually, when we were doing our research, I was trying to look for video of that highlight, but we couldn't find it. But that'd be a fun one if we could ever come across that sometime. So
yeah. I know ESPN was there because I had a clip of it, and it was the old ESPN Gatorade slam dunk, thing from '89. But it's too bad too, because I had graduated that from the cartwheel to a round off.
Oh, really?
So I do a round off and dunk it backwards, and
Wow. Well, Gerry, this has been a lot of fun. I could keep going on. I mean, I saw in your background you martial arts, I believe you've been involved with, and you commit. I think you instructed hand-to-hand combat in the military.
Yes,
and you were law enforcement for a while.
5 years. Los Angeles County Sheriffs, and after the sheriffs, I went back to the University of Iowa as on-campus recruiting coordinator. And Tom is the one who talked me into playing again, actually. So after that, I spent a year and a half in Iowa, and I was about 31. And he said, I was still working out with the squad and practicing every now and again. He said, you still got it. You should really think about playing. And I ended up taking his advice and going over and played till I was 38 in Spain and Germany and Sweden. So did the European thing and ended up getting an offer to work for the royal family of Saudi Arabia. So after that, I went to Saudi Arabia. I lived in the royal palace. I was an exercise specialist and bodyguard for the royal family, and was on vacation in the States during 9/11,
Okay.
and got stuck over here. No, fly rule, whatever. Couldn't travel back to the Middle East, and ended up stuck here and started working in education, and that brings us to where we are today.
My gosh, we can't just gloss that over. Working for the royal family of Saudi Arabia, what was that experience like? What was
Awesome.
it like living in the palace? I mean, what were some of the biggest? What were some of the? What you give us one memory that you go back, or one story from that time that you'd like to tell? I mean, there's got to be something, or a couple. I mean, that's just something we're not going to run into with another guest.
It's there's a lot of royals in Saudi Arabia, but I worked for someone that was in succession for the throne, and so that makes a huge difference. So,
sure,
he was the governor of Mecca and Medina. Their most religious, their most important, religious cities, and also he was the governor of Riyadh, which is one of the most important economic cities. And so, when the entourage rolled, I mean, we're rolling thick, Uzis and body armor, and it's like rolling with the president. Memories, man. I mean, I'll give you a good one. The first time I traveled with the entourage, and so they have this 747, and from the outside it looks just like a regular 747. As soon as we step on board, I'm like, this is like unlike any 747 I've ever seen. It's gutted out, and they have, it's kind of like Air Force One, and then when it's time to have dinner, it's like, come, Prince Abdul Majid, he wants you to come and have dinner with the entourage. So we're all seated around on these huge cushions and pillows, and they're serving, whatever you want. And I'd never seen that before. Like, what do you feel like this evening? And they have a whole galley stocked and locked with anything you could imagine. So that's one memory. I'll give you a better one. I usually was part of the entourage of the princess. And that sounds young to us, but she was, they were mid-50s. They were, even though he was prince and she was princess. I think we have a tendency to think that that's, somewhat young, but no, they were,
sure.
They were in the mid-50s. And she was throwing a dinner party, and it was all women. And she said it would be very inappropriate for you to be there. And so her servant comes to my quarters, and she's apologizing profusely. She said, but the princess wants you to go out and, have a nice dinner. And I was like, no big deal.
Sure.
I'm uncomfortable a lot of times. I've been to, I go down to eat with her entourage, and, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt or something. And she's like, oh, let me introduce you to the minister from England, which actually happened once. It's like some ambassador from, they're all
right.
like, oh, let me go change. And they're like, no, it's totally cool. It's totally cool. And I was like, oh, but so this girl is like telling me, like, here, this is from the princess. I'm like, oh no, she doesn't have it, And I knew it was an envelope of money. She's like, the princess wants you to go out and have a nice dinner, da da da. And she says, I was like, no, she pays me well enough. I'm good. And she said, no, I can't return with this envelope. You have to take it, or I will be in trouble. It was like that. So I understood that. So I mean, it's pretty intense there. So I take the envelope, and I don't pay much attention to it. And the other, there's a friend of mine who also is part of the entourage, and he said, hey, you get one of those envelopes? I was like, yeah. He said, well, what are we doing, man? I was like, whatever, we'll go whatever, Fuddruckers and whatever, some burger place. So, and so I go to grab, a couple of dollars out of there, and I open the envelope, and I'm like, hey, there's about $3,000 in there. And that's when I realized they have no idea the value of money.
Sure.
She gave me $3,000 to go out and get a hamburger. It's like, are you kidding me? And I mean, they really just have no,
Sure.
I think that Prince Abdul Majid at that time, and this is this is around 2000 and 2000, 2001. He was making about $420,000 a day.
Wow.
That's like I try to explain to people how much money and wealth they that they're generating with that oil, and it's like it's beyond comprehension. It totally beyond comprehension. But yeah, so there's a story.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, from a guy that like myself that had a hard time making sure that I put my shirt on correctly this morning, you've led quite the life, Gerry Wright. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really enjoyed it. If I run this too much longer, I'm afraid Adam won't let me have the car keys again. So, and we better let you get back to your family. So, Gerry, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and telling us where you're at and reliving some great Hawkeye memories. And we always end this with the Go Hawks.
Yeah, go Hawks. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Gerry.
Okay. Bye-bye. That was